Hey, back for chapter 4, part 2. There'll be 3 parts of this. And don't forget, our focus is on contrast, things that are different from each other, opposite of each other. They're on personification and they're on imagery. There are many, many examples of imagery here. There'll be challenges that relate to all 3 of those literary devices. Okay, so starting on page 59, here we go. At regular intervals, we ram in the iron stakes. 2 men hold a roll, and the others spool off the barbed wire. It is that awful stuff with close-set, long spikes. I'm not used to unrolling it and tear my hand. So they put out a bunch of barbed wire across the field so that the enemy gets stuck in it and gets hurt, and so that they can kill them that way. This is one of the booby traps that is used in war in World War I. After a few hours, it is done, but there's still some time before the lorries come. Most of us lie down and sleep. I try also, but it has turned too chilly. We know we are not far from the sea because we are constantly waked by the cold. Once I fall fast asleep. Then, wakening suddenly with a start, I do not know where I am. I see the stars. I see the rockets. And for a moment have the impression that I have fallen asleep at a garden fete. A fete is a festival or a party. I don't know whether it is morning or evening. I lie in the pale cradle of the twilight and listen for soft words which will come, soft and near. Am I crying? I put my hand to my eyes. It is so fantastic. Am I a child? Smooth skin. It lasts only a second. Then I recognize the silhouette of Kaczynski. The old veteran, he sits quietly and smokes his pipe. A covered pipe, of course. When he sees I'm awake, he says, "That gave you a fright. It was only a nose cap. It landed in the bushes over there." So Kaczynski's old, he doesn't sleep much, and he covers his pipe because if you saw the light of his pipe, then the enemy would know where you are and they would shoot you. So he's very careful, but obviously he's older and doesn't sleep. And then he says that a bomb that fell close to them is what really woke him up. I sit up. I feel myself strangely alone. It's good Cat is there. He gazes thoughtfully at the front and says, "Mighty fine fireworks if they weren't so dangerous." One lands behind us. Some recruits jump up terrified. A couple of minutes later, another comes over, nearer this time. Cat knocks out his pipe. We're in for it. Then it begins in earnest. That means it seriously begins. We crawl away as well as we can in our haste. The next lands fair among us. That means it's really close. 2 fellows cry out. Green rockets shoot up in the sky, on the skyline. Barrage. That means a bunch of bombs all at once. The mud flies high. Fragments whiz past. The crack of the guns is heard long after the roar of the explosions. Beside us lies a fair-headed recruit, that means blonde hair, in utter terror. He has buried his face in his hands. His helmet has fallen off. I fish hold of it and try to put it back on his head. He looks up, pushes the helmet off, and like a child, creeps under my arm, his head close to my breast. The little shoulders heave, shoulders just like Kemmerch's. I let him be. So that the helmet should be of some use, I stick it on his behind, on his butt. Not for jest, but out of consideration, since that is his highest part. It's higher to the air, so that might get shot first. And though there's plenty of meat there, a shot in it can be damned painful. Besides, a man has to lie for months on his belly in the hospital, and afterwards he would be almost sure to have a limp. It's got someone pretty badly. Cries are heard between the explosions. At last it grows quiet. The fire has lifted over us and is now dropping on the reserves. We risk a look. Red rockets shoot up in the sky. Apparently, there's an attack coming. Where we are is still quiet. I sit up and shake the recruit by the shoulder. "All over, kid. It's all right this time." He looks round him dazedly. "You'll get used to it soon," I tell him. What an awful shame to have to get used to being that terrified. He sees his helmet and puts it on. Gradually, he comes to. Then suddenly, he turns fiery red and looks confused. Cautiously, he reaches his hand to his behind and looks at me dismally. I understand at once. Gun shy. That wasn't the reason I had stuck the helmet over it. That's no disgrace, I reassure him. Many's the man before you has had his pants full after the first bombardment. Go behind that bush there and throw your underpants away. Get along. So he was so scared that he defecated, pooped in his pants. And this is normal, really normal in war. So the initial embarrassment goes away. And it's good to have somebody who's like an older brother tell you, it's all right. It's going to be okay. This is normal. He goes off. Things become quieter, but the cries do not cease. What's up, Albert? I ask. A couple of columns over there got it in the neck. The cries continued. It is not men. They could not cry so terribly. Wounded horses, says Kat. It's unendurable. It is the moaning of the world. It is the martyred creation, wild with anguish, filled with terror and groaning. So the horses that have been shot and bombed sound like they're terribly, terribly crying. And when they talk about martyred, that means that somebody who is free of guilt has died for a cause. The horses have died for a cause here that they didn't choose to die for. They were put into this and they died, and they're what's in modern day called collateral damage. So that they're injured because of somebody else's, the innocent are injured because of somebody else's war, which is not okay. And the author very, very purposefully chooses the word martyred. So think about how that connects to a central idea. We are pale. Dettering stands up. God, for God's sakes, shoot them. He's saying, put the horses out of their misery so we don't have to hear it anymore. He is a farmer and very fond of horses. It gets under his skin. Then, as if deliberately, the fire dies down again. The screaming of the beasts becomes louder. One can no longer distinguish whence in this now quiet silvery landscape it comes. We don't know where they're screaming from. Ghostly, invisible, it is everywhere. Between heaven and earth, it rolls on immeasurably. Dettering raves and yells out, shoot them, can't you? Damn you again! They must look after the men first, says Kat quietly. We stand up and try to see where it is. If we could only see the animals, we should be able to endure it better. Mueller has a pair of glasses. We see a dark group, bearers with stretchers, and larger black clumps moving about. Those are the wounded horses, but not all of them. Some gallop away in the distance, fall down, and then run on farther. The belly of one is ripped open. The guts trail out. He becomes tangled in them and falls. Then he stands up again. Dettering raises up his gun and aims. Kat hits it in the air. Are you mad? Because it'll call attention. If he shoots something, if he fires a shot, it'll call attention to them and they could all die. Dettering trembles and throws his rifle on the ground. We sit down and hold our ears, but this appalling noise, these groans and screams, they penetrate everywhere. We can bear almost anything. We can stand we can deal with almost anything. But now, the sweat breaks out on us. We must get up and run, no matter where, but where these cries can no longer be heard. And it is not men, only horses. From the dark group, stretchers move off again. The single shots crack out. The black heap convulses and then sinks down. At last, that means the horse has died. At last, but still it is not the end. The men cannot overtake the wounded beasts, which fly in their pain, their wide open mouths full of anguish. One of the men goes down on one knee. A shot. One horse drops. Another. The last one props itself on its forelegs and drags itself round in a circle like a merry-go-round. Simile. Squatting. It drags round in circles on its stiffened forelegs. Apparently its back is broken. The soldier runs up and shoots it. Slowly, humbly, it sinks to the ground. A horse can't be humble. So again, we're personifying a horse. So it has quietly given over its life in its last moments as it dies. We take our hands from our ears. The cries are silence. Only a long drawn, dying sigh still hangs in the air. Then only again the rockets, the singing of the shells and the stars there. Most strange. Singing of bombs. So again, personifying, contrast, imagery, all connected in one idea. Dettering walks up and down cursing. Like to know what harm they've done. He's talking about the horses. What harm have the horses done? He returns to it once again. His voice is agitated. It sounds almost dignified as he says, I tell you, it is the vilest baseness to use horses in a war. And don't forget, in World War I, it's the first time that in the middle of a war, they changed from horses to technology with tanks. So it isn't long after this that actually happens. And who knows if Dettering will be alive long enough to see these tanks. Okay, so we'll end there for part 2 of chapter 4. Collect your thoughts, look at your notes, see where there might have been ideas of images ones that I didn't point out. There were plenty of that I didn't point out, and personification and contrast. And we'll get back together again for chapter 4, part 3 in a couple of minutes.